smash that subscribe button, hit like if you believe the truth should never stay buried, and drop a comment below. The alarm inside North Ridge Correctional Facility screamed through the concrete corridors at 5:42 p.m. Metal doors slammed open. Boots pounded against the cold floor. Officers shouted orders that echoed through the cavernous dining hall. At the center of the chaos, an inmate lay motionless beside his tray. His name was Marcus Bennett, inmate number 48127, 32 years old. Serving 8 years for armed robbery. Tough reputation. Quiet personality. But right now, Marcus wasn't moving. A plastic tray had fallen beside him, splattering watery brown gravy across the gray tile. A pale slab of something that was supposed to be meatloaf sat half-chewed on the floor. An officer knelt beside him. "Bennett, can you hear me?" Marcus's body twitched once. Then nothing. The cafeteria froze. More than 200 inmates sat at their metal tables, watching silently. No one moved. No one spoke. Because this wasn't the first time. The prison medic rushed in with a defibrillator case. "What happened?" she asked sharply. "Collapsed while eating," the officer replied. She looked down at the tray. Grayish potatoes. Bread so dry it looked like chalk. A spoonful of mystery meat. Marcus's lips were slightly purple. She checked his pulse. Very weak. "Get him to medical now." 2 guards lifted Marcus onto a stretcher and rushed him out through the steel doors. The cafeteria buzzed with whispers the moment they disappeared. "Another one. That's the 3rd this month. They're poisoning us." An officer slammed a baton against the table. "Quiet." The room fell silent again. But the fear had already spread. Because the inmates knew something the guards refused to admit. The food was wrong. And it had been wrong for a long time. 2 days later, Detective Lena Morales walked through the main gates of North Ridge. She wasn't supposed to be here. Officially, Marcus Bennett's collapse had been labeled a medical incident. No investigation required. But someone had leaked a tip to the state inspector's office. 3 inmate collapses in 4 weeks. All during dinner. All after eating the same meal. Morales had built a reputation for asking questions people didn't want asked. And North Ridge had a lot of things it didn't want examined. The warden greeted her in the administration wing with a forced smile. Warden Paul Hargrove was a tall man in his late 50s, with silver hair and a politician's handshake. "Detective Morales," he said warmly. "We weren't expecting a visit." "I know," she replied calmly. She handed him her authorization. "Routine inquiry." Hargrove skimmed the paper. His smile faded slightly. "There's really nothing unusual here," he said. "Just a few inmates with underlying health problems." Morales nodded slowly. "Then you won't mind if I look around?" A long pause. "Of course not," Hargrove said. But something in his eyes said otherwise. The prison cafeteria smelled like overcooked grease and disinfectant. Rows of metal tables stretched across the room. Morales stood near the serving line, watching trays slide past. Dinner tonight looked exactly like the reports described. Gray mashed potatoes. Watery beans. A rubbery slice of processed meat. But something else caught her attention. Across the room, behind a separate door marked "Staff Only," a guard stepped out carrying a plate. Not a tray. A plate. And it smelled incredible. Grilled chicken. Steamed vegetables. Fresh bread. Morales followed him with her eyes as he sat at a small table in a corner reserved for officers. The difference was impossible to ignore. Inmates received food that looked barely edible. Guards were eating restaurant-quality meals. She turned to the cafeteria supervisor. "Where does the staff food come from?" The supervisor hesitated. "Separate kitchen." "Why?" "Budget allocations," he said quickly. Morales raised an eyebrow. "Budget gives inmates this," she said, gesturing toward the trays. "And officers that?" The man avoided her gaze. "That's above my pay grade." Morales spent the next hour interviewing inmates in the dining area. Most refused to talk. But one finally leaned closer. His name was Andre Wallace. And he looked terrified. "You didn't hear this from me," Andre whispered. Morales nodded. "Go on." Andre glanced around the room. You ever wonder why guards never eat this stuff? Morales stayed silent. Because they know what's in it. What do you mean? Andre leaned closer. Something's mixed in the food. Morales frowned. What kind of something? Andre shook his head. Don't know. But every time someone collapses, they were eating the same thing. He pointed toward the serving counter. The mashed potatoes. Morales looked at the tray again. Strangely thick. Almost paste-like. Why hasn't anyone reported this? She asked. Andre laughed quietly. To who? The people serving it. Then his voice dropped even lower. Last guy who complained got transferred. Transferred where? Andre met her eyes. Solitary. Morales requested access to the kitchen. The cafeteria manager reluctantly escorted her through a swinging metal door. Inside, the kitchen was loud and hot. Industrial ovens roared. Large pots boiled on steel stoves. Inmates in hairnets stirred giant vats of food under the watchful eyes of armed guards. Everything looked ordinary at first glance. Until Morales noticed something strange. A locked door in the back of the kitchen. It had a keypad. And a red warning label. Authorized person only. What's in there? Morales asked. The manager froze. Storage. For what? Bulk supplies. Morales stepped closer to the door. Open it. The manager hesitated. I don't have clearance. Morales turned to the guard standing nearby. Then call someone who does. The guard radioed upstairs. Minutes later, Warden Hargrove arrived. He looked annoyed. Detective, that area isn't relevant to your inquiry. 3 inmates collapsed, Morales said calmly. I decide what's relevant. A tense silence followed. Finally, Hargrove sighed. He punched in a code. The lock beeped. The door slowly opened. The room inside was cold. A refrigerated storage area. Shelves lined the walls. Stacked from floor to ceiling were large plastic containers. Each one labeled with a barcode. Morales stepped closer. Inside the containers was a thick gray substance. The exact same color as the mashed potatoes on the trays. She picked up one of the containers. No brand name. No ingredient list. Just a code. Nutritional supplement, 7. Morales turned to the warden. What is this? Hargrove didn't answer immediately. It's a dietary additive, he finally said. For what? Cost efficiency. Morales studied the gray paste. Why isn't it listed on the meal records? Another silence. Because that's when she noticed something even more disturbing. A clipboard sitting on a nearby table. Rows of data. Dates. Meal times. Inmate numbers. And one column labeled Behavioral Response. Morales felt the tension in the room shift. She slowly looked back at the warden. Why are you tracking behavior based on what inmates eat? Hargrove's jaw tightened. But he still didn't answer. And that's when Morales realized something terrifying. This wasn't just bad prison food. It was something far worse. Because whatever was in that gray paste, someone was using it to study the inmates. And when she flipped to the final page of the clipboard, she saw a name circled in red. Marcus Bennett. But next to his name was a note that made her blood run cold. Subject showed unexpected reaction. Increased dosage for next trial. Morales looked up slowly. Because in that moment, the investigation had just turned into something much bigger than prison meals. And somewhere inside North Ridge Correctional Facility, someone was running experiments on the inmates. And Marcus Bennett was only the beginning. By the time Detective Lena Morales stepped out of the refrigerated storage room, the air in the prison kitchen felt heavier. The clipboard in her hands trembled slightly as she read the words again. Increased dosage for next trial. Trial. That word didn't belong in a prison kitchen. Morales slowly turned to face Warden Paul Hargrove, who stood stiffly beside the open freezer door. You want to explain this? She asked. Hargrove's expression hardened. It's a nutritional program, he said. Approved by the Department of Corrections. Morales lifted the clipboard. Nutritional programs don't track behavioral responses. Hargrove didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the containers of gray paste. It's a supplement designed to improve inmate health. Morales crouched beside one of the bins and unscrewed the lid. The smell that drifted out wasn't food. It was chemical. Artificial. What's actually in it? She asked. Protein blend, Hargrove replied. Morales looked back at him. Funny, she said quietly. Protein doesn't usually come with dosage adjustments. The silence between them stretched tight. Finally, Hargrove said, Detective, you're misinterpreting routine documentation. Morales stood up. No, she said. I think I'm just starting to understand it. An hour later, Morales sat inside the prison medical wing reviewing Marcus Bennett's medical chart. The attending doctor, Dr. Evelyn Grant, stood across the desk looking uncomfortable. His blood work came back abnormal, Morales said. Dr. Grant nodded. What kind of abnormal? The doctor hesitated before sliding a printed report across the desk. Morales scanned the page. Her eyebrows slowly lifted. What is this compound? She asked. Dr. Grant lowered her voice. I don't know. Morales looked up sharply. You're the prison physician. Yes, Grant said quietly. But that chemical isn't part of any medication I've prescribed. Morales tapped the report. It's in his bloodstream. I know. How? Grant exhaled. That's what I've been asking. Morales flipped to another page. 2 more medical reports. 2 other inmates. Same compound. Same abnormal levels. Same symptoms before collapse. Morales leaned back in her chair. All 3 collapsed after dinner. Grant nodded again. Morales thought about the gray paste. Then she asked the question. Does the medical staff eat the same meals as inmates? Grant looked surprised. No. What about guards? They have their own kitchen. Morales's eyes narrowed. A separate kitchen, she repeated slowly. Grant nodded. Yes. The staff dining area was located down a quiet corridor behind the administration offices. Morales pushed open the door. The smell hit her immediately. Fresh bread, grilled meat, real vegetables. Nothing like the cafeteria. Inside, 3 correctional officers sat eating dinner. Steak. Mashed potatoes that were actually white. Green beans. One of them looked up. Can I help you? Morales walked to the serving counter. A cook in a clean apron stood behind stainless steel trays filled with food that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. Where does this come from? Morales asked. The cook shrugged. State contract supplier. Same supplier as the inmate kitchen? The cook laughed. No way. Morales folded her arms. So inmates eat one thing. She gestured toward the trays. And staff eat another. The cook nodded. Pretty much. Morales leaned closer. Why? The cook's smile faded. That's not my department. Later that night, Morales sat in her car outside the prison gates. Her notebook lay open across the passenger seat. 3 inmate collapses. Chemical compound in their blood. Gray paste labeled NRX-7. And a behavioral tracking chart. But the most disturbing part wasn't what she knew. It was what she didn't. Who made NRX-7? And why was it only being fed to inmates? Morales pulled out her phone and called someone she trusted. Investigative journalist Daniel Keller. He answered on the second ring. Morales, he said. Didn't expect to hear from you tonight. I need a favor. Those are usually dangerous words. She glanced back at the prison. Have you ever heard of a compound called NRX-7? There was a pause. Then Keller said something that made her sit upright. Where did you hear that name? So you have heard of it? Yes, Keller replied slowly. But not in prisons. Morales gripped the steering wheel. Then where? Another pause. Then Keller said 2 words. Military research. The next morning, Morales met Keller at a small diner 20 miles from North Ridge. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Keller slid a folder across the table. I pulled this from an old defense contract investigation, he said. Morales opened the folder. Inside were heavily redacted documents. Government research summaries. Chemical analysis reports. One page had the compound name circled. 7. Morales looked up. What is it? Keller leaned forward. Originally developed as a behavioral stabilizer. For soldiers? Not exactly, Keller said. Morales frowned. Then for who? Keller tapped the file. Detention facilities overseas. Morales felt a chill creep down her spine. You're telling me this was designed for prisoners? Keller nodded. The idea was simple, he said. Reduce aggression. Increase compliance. Morales remembered the clipboard column. Behavioral response. How does it work? She asked. Keller flipped to another page. It alters neurological signals tied to impulse control. Morales stared at him. You mean it changes how people behave? Exactly. She sat back slowly. So someone is feeding this to inmates at North Ridge. Keller nodded grimly. And probably studying the results. Morales closed the folder. But why? Keller's expression darkened. Because prisons are the perfect testing ground. Morales's stomach tightened. Captive population. No public oversight. And complaints are easy to dismiss. Morales looked back toward the direction of the prison. 3 inmates collapsed. Keller's face went still. That means something went wrong. Morales nodded. Or the dosage changed. That afternoon, Morales returned to North Ridge. But this time, she didn't go to the kitchen. She went to the security office. A young guard sat behind the monitor desk. Detective Morales, she said, flashing her badge. I need footage from the cafeteria last Tuesday. The guard pulled up the system. Rows of screens filled the wall. But when he searched the date Morales gave him, his face changed. That's weird. What? That camera's blank. Morales leaned closer. Blank? Yeah, he said. No recording. Check the other cameras. He did. 2 more angles. Also blank. Morales felt her pulse quicken. All the cameras were down? The guard shook his head. No. He pointed to another screen. The hallway camera still worked. Morales watched the footage. Inmates entering the cafeteria. Guards standing watch. Everything normal. Then suddenly, 3 men walked into frame. They weren't wearing prison uniforms. They wore suits. And they carried sealed containers. Morales leaned forward. Pause that. The guard froze the frame. The men were delivering the containers into the kitchen. Morales recognized the shape immediately. The same containers she'd seen in the freezer. NRX 7. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was who walked in behind them. Warden Hargrove. Talking quietly. Smiling. Supervising the delivery. Morales stared at the screen. Zoom in on the container label. The guard enlarged the image. The barcode filled the monitor. Under it was a company name. One Morales had never heard before. Helix Nutritional Systems. But Keller had. Because when Morales called him and read the name, he went silent. Morales, he said slowly, you need to get out of that prison. Her heartbeat quickened. Why? Keller's voice dropped. Because Helix isn't a food supplier. Morales felt dread settle in her chest. Then what are they? Keller answered with 3 chilling words. A private research contractor. Morales turned slowly toward the prison kitchen corridor. Because suddenly the experiments made sense. The chemical compound. The behavioral charts. The hidden deliveries. But what terrified her most was what Keller said next. North Ridge isn't the only prison on their list. Morales stared at the screen again. Because if he was right, then what was happening here wasn't just corruption. It was a nationwide experiment. And the inmates didn't even know they were the test subjects. The storm rolled over North Ridge Correctional Facility the night everything began to unravel. Rain pounded against the watchtowers. Lightning lit the razor wire that wrapped around the prison like a cage within a cage. Inside her car across the street, Detective Lena Morales stared at the building that had just become the center of something much darker than prison corruption. A nationwide experiment. Human subjects. And a chemical compound hidden in food. Her phone buzzed in her hand. It was Daniel Keller again. I dug deeper into Helix Nutritional Systems, he said. Morales leaned forward. And? They're not just a contractor, Keller continued. They're a defense subcontractor. Morales felt her chest tighten. For the military? Yes, Keller said. But that's not the disturbing part. What is? They don't manufacture food. A long pause hung in the air. They manufacture behavioral compounds. Lightning flashed across the prison walls. Morales whispered, NRX 7. Exactly. Morales closed her eyes briefly. So inmates are being dosed with a neurological modifier. Keller's voice grew darker. And the data is being collected. Morales thought about the clipboard again. Behavioral response. They're measuring compliance, she said. Yes. How long has this been happening? Keller sighed. That's the question. The next morning, Morales returned to North Ridge before sunrise. This time she didn't check in at the front desk. She walked straight to the administrative records office. The clerk behind the desk looked confused. Detective, visiting hours don't start until. Morales placed her badge on the counter. I need procurement records for food shipments. The clerk hesitated. That requires authorization from the warden. Morales held her stare. Then call him. But the clerk's phone rang before she could dial. She answered quietly. Her expression changed. Then she slowly hung up. Detective, she said nervously, Warden Hargrove won't be coming in today. Morales frowned. Why not? He resigned. The words hit like a sudden gust of cold air. Resigned? Morales repeated. Yes. When? This morning. Morales's pulse quickened. That wasn't resignation. That was flight. Morales called Keller immediately. He's gone, she said. Who? Hargrove. Silence. Then Keller said, That's bad. You think he's running? I think he was told to. Morales walked quickly toward the parking lot. Why would they pull him out now? Keller answered quietly. Because you started asking questions. Morales opened her car door. Then we don't have much time. For what? Keller asked. To find out how big this program really is. By noon, Keller had pulled federal procurement logs. And what they revealed made Morales's stomach drop. Helix shipments weren't just going to North Ridge. They were going to 23 prisons across the country. State facilities. Private prisons. Juvenile detention centers. Every shipment labeled the same way. NRX Nutritional Supplement. Morales stared at the screen. This isn't a test anymore. No, Keller said quietly. It's a rollout. Morales rubbed her temples. How many inmates are we talking about? Keller exhaled slowly. Thousands. 2 days later, the story broke. Keller published the investigation online. Secret behavioral experiments inside U.S. prisons. Within hours it exploded across media networks. Civil rights organizations demanded answers. Lawmakers called emergency hearings. Former inmates came forward with stories of dizziness, memory loss, and strange emotional numbness. The Department of Corrections issued a statement. We are reviewing the allegations. But Morales knew the truth. They had known all along. 3 weeks later, Morales sat in a congressional hearing room. Bright lights filled the chamber. Reporters lined the walls. Across the table sat representatives from Helix Nutritional Systems. Their CO spoke calmly into the microphone. NRX 7 is a dietary supplement designed to support inmate wellness. Morales nearly laughed. Your compound alters neurological impulse control, she said. The CEO adjusted his glasses. That interpretation is inaccurate. Morales slid the toxicology report across the table. 3 inmates collapsed. Unrelated medical events. Morales leaned forward. Then why were you measuring behavioral responses? The room went silent. The CEO didn't answer. Because he couldn't. 2 months later, the federal investigation officially shut down the NRX program. Shipments stopped. Contracts were canceled. Helix Nutritional Systems lost millions. But something about the outcome bothered Morales. Late one night she sat in her apartment rereading the investigation files. Something didn't add up. The program had been too large, too organized, too well-funded. for it to disappear that quickly. Her phone buzzed. A message from Keller. "You need to see this." He sent a document. Morales opened it. Her heart slowed. It was a procurement invoice. Dated 2 weeks ago. A shipment order. But not for a prison. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.